Good morning. Thank you. We're thrilled to be here as well. We will try to be as fast as possible in order to keep track with time. As part of Radio alHara that we started in March 2020 during the lockdown, this is an image of our studio where we hosted an experimental artist and Yarghoul musician. So today within our presentation, we'll try to cover the many aspects of our practice that involves our architecture studio, AAU Anastas, local industries, which is our industrial design arm of production, art production and design production, the Radio alHara, and finally our new project that is about to open this year, the Wonder Cabinet.
So we'll start with that sort of a map of 1918 from the British Mandate in Palestine. This map defines the master plan of Jerusalem, and as part of this master plan there's a bylaw that forces all buildings in Jerusalem to be built out of stone. So this law is still applied today in Jerusalem, but also in practically all major cities in Palestine. This law was officially set to create a sort of an urban continuity or a visual continuity in the city, but unofficially this law has created place for political, territorial, cultural agendas. So basically, from the moment all buildings in Jerusalem have to be built out of stone, any building that wasn't built out of stone was technically out of Jerusalem. So the reclaim of Jerusalem as a territory was also set by this law that stipulates the use of stone. Now this law has been expanded to all major cities, and what we have today in contemporary architecture is one construction method, one construction technique that has led to a city that today is very monotonous in terms of urban setup, and so the use of one single material has created a city that is quite that loses actually the knowledge and the know-how of stone that was historically present in Palestinian cities. As you can see here, in those two images, on the left-hand side you have the sophistication, I don't know if you see very well, but the stereotomy and the cuts of stone of this lintel in the old city of Bethlehem, and on the right-hand side you have the contemporary use of the stone, which is actually basically used only as a cladding, which is globally the same in all, let's say, countries. But in Palestine, it has this sort of specificity linked to the territorial reclaim.
So as part of this as part of this analysis, we started a project almost 10 years ago that's called Stone Matters. It's part of our research department at the studio, where we are trying to investigate the use of stone in Palestine, but more in a general and global trend. And the idea of the project is to reposition stone as a noble material, as a structural and thermal component in architecture, and trying to position it as well in the conditions of contemporary conditions of production of architecture. This is an image of a solo show that is currently running in Bahrain that shows elements of architecture and prototypes of structures that we are currently working on with stone.
So as part of this project, Stone Matters, we started several experimentation-based projects that were always looking at stone as a material, but also as stone as a creator of an architectural space. So this first experimentation is in collaboration with an artist residency in Jericho, in the city of Jericho. So they provided the entire site of the residency as an experimentation space. So the construction site becomes, on a long-term basis, a place where we experiment prototype after prototype the final project, which will be a sort of a huge assembly of vaults, half of the year functioning as an artist residency, and the other half of the year it transforms into a public space that is left to the city to be used as a shaded space. And you can see on that image the building on the background and the building and the vault basically. And so you can see on the building on the background that the historical landmarks or the historical references of the use of stone has have been all lost in contemporary architecture. So you can see a certain number of different windows, this sort of roof that has nothing to do with Palestinian architecture, not in a folkloric way, but let's say that the knowledge and the know-how of the use of stone has completely disappeared. That was actually in the Palestinian cities completely linked to nature. So basically, if you look at the Palestinian city, the city is very dense and is built around a sort of a very dense center of the city, and the surroundings are left empty as a way of preserving nature. So there's this component of architecture and nature that are very much linked through the use of the material, but also through the composition of the relation between architecture and nature.
So there's a project that we've been commissioned to work on by the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2018. And that project was inspired by a very specific area on the peripheries of Bethlehem, and it's an area that is threatened to be expropriated. So the local community around this area, and there's a monastery as well in the area, started what they call the Friday gatherings, and they would actually meet on a weekly basis in the valley to protest the passage of the wall. But in reality, after being part of these gatherings, we understood that what we're trying to fight is the relationship between, what we're trying to maintain actually is the relationship between architecture and nature that was embedded within the language of architecture in Palestine. So the towering structure that we proposed was a structure that created the link between architecture and nature through the idea of the curve. The curve is something that we are very much interested in our studio, and trying to identify ways to link architecture to nature through the element of the curve.
So as a sort of this exploration of stone material in contemporary architecture, we started this series of elemental architectural components that are made out of stone. So in the case of the towering structure, it was maybe a sort of a wall built out of stone, or a system of a wall. Let's say here we have another iteration, which is a lintel. So this structure is also at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it serves as a bench, but is built exactly like the lintels that are present in the historical cities. So basically, there are three arches, three continuous arches, let's say, and the interfaces in between the stones are based on stereotomy. Stereotomy is the way of assembling stones in order to have a global structure, let's say.
This other project is called Analogy, and it's basically trying to identify how elements of architecture travel through time and how the different civilizations affected the formation of architecture in different parts of the world. So this vault that stands on four walls has been very present in the construction in architecture in Palestine in the 30s, but was found as well in many other parts of the world, in Renaissance palaces elsewhere in Italy or France. And what we're trying to do as part of the research is to desacralize the use of stone, so reposition stone as an element that's part of the common language of architecture and not reserve it to very specific typologies of architecture.
So we have the ability of exploring different iterations and experimentation made out of stone, but this is also linked to laws and regulations, let's say, that are sometimes in our favor, sometimes not in our favor. Like you can see here, a modern architecture building in Palestine being destroyed because the law that we have protects any building that is built before 1917. And you have a trend of just destroying modern architecture in Palestine and building commercial centers or real estate projects. And what is interesting in the modern architecture buildings is that you have this hybrid transitional period between the use of stone as a structural material and the use of stone as cladding. So in those buildings, you have a use of stone that is in a composition of a wall that is more or less hybrid. So you have stones that are still thick enough, composed with a sort of another concrete wall. So it's a sort of a hybrid wall, which makes it actually easier to reuse stone as a structural component, which we did here in collecting stones from a demolished building from the beginning of the century, and reusing the stones to compose a column that could be used in contemporary architecture, a column that is made of these stones and some new stones that you can see that create the interface in between the different layers.
We'll try to hurry up. This is another project that we're currently working on in the city of Matera, and the aim of the project is to work on the resemblance in the formation of the city of Matera compared to Jerusalem, and the ways stone has been used in the two different contexts.
This project is in a small village next to Jerusalem that is called Abu Ghosh. This project is a flat vault, so it's let's say a slab that is made out of stones that are assembled together through interfaces again. But this was an extension of a monastery, so a sort of a flat vault that spans a distance of 7 meters by 7 meters, and that is an extension of a monastery that was built by the Crusaders. So the idea of the project was to create an insertion in the site that is linked to the techniques rather than the shape.
This is our last iteration that was shown last year during the Venice Biennale at the Giardini Pavilion, where we tried to think about how a stone structure can reverberate a very specific functionality in plan. So trying to understand how a typology of a habitat can depend on how it's built technically and methodically. Just going very quickly over a few other projects. This is a project that we're currently working on in the studio. It's a building for an art foundation in Jordan, in Amman. And it's basically trying to use stone again as an element to create an infrastructure. So the entire building is made out of stone, including columns, vaults, and beams. This is a courthouse that was built in the city of Tulkarem in the north of Palestine. That was for us a moment to think about transformability of architecture and how a building of a courthouse can transform in time and can adapt to different configurations in the city. So we're very much interested in the idea of time and how architecture is not about doing something punctual, but trying to think about how a building can keep a trace on a territory. And this is now the courthouse that has been just inaugurated in the city of Hebron, where we tried to adapt the brief of the project to the local know-hows. So it was very interesting to link the scales, which is here linking the scale of a monumental building to the available craftsmanship that are found in the city.
So this building was sort of quite massive in terms of scale compared to the city. So the idea was to insert it in the urban fabric through the use of windows and elements of architecture that were taken from typological spaces found in the historical city. So in this other project, we worked on a renovation project in the old city, which has been inaugurated a week ago. And in this project, the idea was to maintain the exact same typological spaces that were existing and add two main elements: a new circulation system and the stone vault on the unfinished roof. So these stairs actually cross the internal patio, offering new perspectives on the old building.
Very quickly, Local Industries is our industrial design production arm. And the idea was born through one of the projects that we've been commissioned to work on. It was a music conservatory, and we ended up working on the entire collection of furniture in the building, and found out that working on different scales of detailing and craftsmanship really became fundamental to our practice. And very similarly to the way Local Industries works, In March 2020, at the beginning of the lockdown, we started Radio alHara with other friends in Ramallah and Amman. And the idea of the radio is to bring a larger community and create transdisciplinarity across borders. These are images of a protest that we started as part of the programmation of the radio during July 2020, when Israel decided to annex territories that are around the West Bank. We decided to create this moment of solidarity, a moment of protest, where we invited a certain number of artists to come together and protest the passage of the wall. Thank you.